these pieces together, and we ask you please to welcome General Gallagher.
Can everybody hear me? Yeah, okay. Well, I do want to thank you, General Shea, General Wood, Mike, Jim Mingus. Jim's actually the dynamic and handsome one of all of us here, but it is truly an honor to be back home here in God's country, okay? Jim talked to me about kind of giving a top-level overview of kind of framing the problem and framing the plan. And so as the network cross-functional team lead, I'm kind of nested under the bigger, greater plan that's actually being integrated at the top by the CIO G6. Because DC never sleeps and because AFCEA is always busy, General Crawford couldn't be here today because he's speaking at another AFCEA function, but he will arrive later today and he's going to join us for the Mission Command Summit tomorrow. But framing the problem, it kind of starts, if you think about today, 30 degrees roughly, drizzling rain, it's April, you're in Kansas City, it must be baseball season, right? Okay. If you check the standings, the Royals are 0-3. That's kind of a problem. We got a couple options, okay? We got to start winning, or if you live in D.C., you root for the Nats. The Nats are 4-0, so that's plan B, and that's kind of what I'm going to go with, at least for a while, till the Royals can bounce out of the rut that they're in. Is there anybody in the room that's actually from Kansas besides me? Okay, welcome to God's country. This is where the rubber meets the road, and this is where it all happens. This is where the magic happens. Dorothy, Toto, all those good things. The Jayhawks. Anybody watch the game Saturday? That was pretty rough if you're a Jayhawks fan. Villanova took it to them. I thought, holy cow. It'll be interesting to see what happens Monday night. And last night we saw what happened. Villanova is definitely for real. As Jim said, 2 out of the last 3 years. Obviously, if you're a Villanova fan, congratulations. If you're a Jayhawks fan like me, better luck next year. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the next slide. You'll see several versions of this later on in a more kind of a matrix fashion, but this is really the network that the Army, the underlying principle is we got to prepare the Army for war. Readiness is our number one priority. And then we got to fight and win no matter where we go. We got to conduct war. It's about fighting and winning and making those, bringing home those young men and women that are doing the nation's work out there, and the network's got to be able to enable that. So what do our war fighters have to be able to do? They have to be able to fight, move, shoot, communicate, protect themselves, and sustain. And the network we deliver has to be able to enable that. So what this depicts is kind of the characteristics of that network. It's got to be simple. It's got to be intuitive. It's got to be resilient. It's got to be mobile. It's got to be capable of being operated and maintained by soldiers. And it's got to keep up in a very lethal, very volatile fight. And then some of the technical network characteristics and requirements are on the right-hand side. One of the things is we've been going through this over the last year or so, as we've taken, especially under Jim Mingus' leadership here and John Morrison, is taking a good hard look at the requirements. And we have over-prescribed our requirements. And as we went through the definition of the principles and the characteristics and the requirements of the network, we spent a lot of time with General Milley, with General Abrams, with General Perkins, General Perna, and a lot of the Army senior leadership, really looking at every word and trying to make sure we get it right, because we don't want to over-specify, but we do want to make sure that we give industry the opportunity to provide us the best possible capabilities. And so this is what we came up with. Let's go ahead and, to frame the problem, I want to take it another step. Let's take it to the next slide, please. So the network that the Army relies on is really a network of networks. It's a bunch of stuff, okay? It's about $11 billion a year, kind of spread out amongst 4 joint capability mission areas, okay, or the mission areas. Top left is the enterprise mission area, or EIEMA. It's really EIEIO, EIEMA, it's enterprise, okay? It's the Department of Defense Information Network, the DODIN, that the Army delivers at every post, camp, and station across the planet. And that's a pretty big piece of the pie. So if you're thinking about $11 billion a year, about 44% of it or so goes to just getting the Army connected across the globe at the enterprise level. The Army's portion of the Defense Intelligence Mission Area, it's 3%, but it's really what the Army does to ensure that we have the intelligence we need. We're connected to the intelligence community IT enterprise, and the ability to ensure that intel drives ops and that when we go into harm's way, we know what we're going into. The business mission area is about 22% of that, and that really is, that's those enterprise resourcing planning tools, the ability to generate readiness across the Army, to recruit our soldiers, to pay our soldiers, to have logistics that enable our force to be able to fight and do what it needs to do. And then the bottom left there, the warfighting missionaries, about 33% of the overall budget every year, and that's really about the fighting and the winning wherever we go. So as we spent the last year unpacking the network and the strategy you're going to hear about, and you're going to hear a lot more about the warfighting mission area, what I want to do, based on what General Mingus asked me to do, is kind of give you the top-level view and the complexity of the problem, because all of these mission areas are interrelated. They're all interdependent, and you don't really, unless we get the enterprise right, we can't have a plug-and-play environment to launch from home station, get out to the fight, and be able to fight on arrival. Unless we have the intelligence underpinnings, we're going to go in blind, we're going to go in cold, and we're not going to be able to, we're not going to be able to fight on arrival. And this ability to just generate readiness through the standard Army business, it's about getting our soldiers paid, it's about getting them trained, it's about making sure that they're taken care of from, promotions and everything else that goes into it. And then again, the warfighting missionary is really where the rubber meets the road, and that's why we've been spending so much time over the last year really trying to get that piece right. Next slide. All right, so the enterprise. What is the Army enterprise? Well, the Army's big. It's pretty daunting. As I mentioned, about 44% or so of the $11 billion a year just goes into this aspect. 288 Army installations across the globe. If you look at it, we've got about over 3,700 Army Reserve and National Guard centers that all have to be connected with dependable communications that allows the Army to function as a force. Okay? And this kind of shows you, the scope of it around the globe. What are the main things we're trying to accomplish in the enterprise? It's really about establishing what we're calling the joint information environment, which is about being more effective, being more efficient, and being more secure. It's about converging and collapsing a lot of the disparate networks. It's about making sure we have situational understanding, being able to see ourselves. We've had a very difficult time across the network with so much attack surface across this enterprise network because as it was built over time, there wasn't always a NetCom, there wasn't always an Army Cyber. In many cases, every one of these installations used to be an island unto itself. We had a director of information management out there working for the garrison commander, and every installation was kind of its own little domain. And over time, the Army's made some very conscious decisions to fix the enterprise, but it takes time, and it's a big, fairly daunting task. But between the efforts of NetCom and the efforts of Army Cyber Command, we're making great strides in really reducing the surface, converging the networks, getting better situational understanding, and really better management of our assets. From endpoint management of every endpoint that's out there to defense in depth and having a much better understanding of what's really in the enterprise, because this enterprise is what enables all the other four missionaries to come together. So those are kind of three of the big things that we're trying to focus on as we optimize the enterprise in order to ensure the Army has the network it really needs. Next slide. It's in the business environment. Again, this is the care and feeding of our, basically the enterprise resource planning systems that are out there. You've got the Army Enterprise Systems Integration Program, which kind of ties the big four together. GCSSA, which is the Global Combat System Support System Army. You got the Logistics Management Program. You've got GFEBS, which is the money aspect of it all, the financing of the force. And then you got the Integrated Pay and Personnel System Army. Those are kind of the big four. But there's a variety of other business systems out there that allow the Army to function. And what these are all about is really that Title X responsibility to actually generate readiness. If you look at the underlying principles about what we do, prepare for war and conduct war, this is all about the preparation for war. But it also enables the conduct of war, the reach back, the ability to, again, have the fiscal assets necessary and the logistics assets necessary to take care of our soldiers and take care of the mission. A lot of efforts in this space, they're trying to really get into big, with General Cardone's focus there from the Office of Business Transformation, they've been taking a good hard look at big data analytics and a front-end dashboard to simplify the decision-making for the senior leaders, and making sure we've got the supporting infrastructure to cover all that. And so a lot of the work is being done to take a look at the sensors on the network, unstructured data. How do we synthesize it? How do we optimize it for decision-making? Again, for Army senior leadership. Next slide. The intel environment. Now, Wes Carter's in the room here. This is the Army's portion of the Defense Intelligence Mission Area. And there's they're again, very similar to what we're trying to do with the enterprise, what we're trying to do with the business systems, what we're trying to do with the tactical edge is streamline and standardize, reduce the attack surface, and optimize the intelligence portion. So there's several steps that they're taking. One is to standardize, get common standards, a standards-based architecture, modernize the tactical aspect of it, which is the Trojan Spirit network, roll out what's called ISITE, or the Intel Community's Information Technology Enterprise, which is the Intel's equivalent of the Joint Information Enterprise, and then use the efforts on the joint enterprise to ensure that they have the transport and can tunnel through the transport that the enterprise delivers, and all while they're modernizing and hardening their information assurance processes, using the risk management framework to, again, reduce the threat and reduce the risks on the intelligence networks. And then the last step on the intel side, it's about governance, okay? So if you remember the pie chart, as the first chart there, where you saw the 4 different mission areas, one of the first sessions with the chief and the acting secretary at the time, it was all about establishing governance, okay? With $11 billion a year, and every one of those mission areas kind of revolving on a governance structure all its own, the first step and the first question that the chief asked is who's in charge. And he directed the CIOG-6 to take the lead as the lead integrator and determine what the governance structure is going to be. And you'll probably hear a little bit more of this from Colonel Brown later today. But they established the IT Oversight Council to govern all 4 aspects and all 4 mission areas. The IT Governance Council, or Oversight Council, is actually chaired by the Undersecretary of the Army and the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. Okay. They make the prioritization decisions of this $11 billion a year enterprise to determine what resources need to go where to optimize the Army's ability to prepare for war and conduct war along all 4 of these mission areas. Inside the intel mission area, and you're going to hear a lot about it from the Deputy Secretary of Defense, we've already been given marching orders about moving to the cloud. The Army's got a few different cloud pilots going on, but I will tell you that there's more work to be done in this space. And in the intel side, they're going with the cloud-first initiative and cloud-first strategy. And you've probably read a lot about what the intel community, some of what they're doing in the cloud environment. We are trying to go to school and learn from that as we go forward, in not only in the enterprise, but in the tactical side as well. Okay. Next slide. All right, so you will see this chart again on a couple different briefings. But if you look at the left-hand side, this is the OV, the operational view, the kind of the current state. It's multiple systems out there, a very stovepiped approach, very layered. And again, the network we have is really not optimized. It's not as effective as it needs to be. It's not very efficient. And it also isn't really secure because we got a lot of seams and gaps and we got a lot of attack surface. So in order to attack the problem, the team has been working on this comprehensive strategy to get to this future state. A converged network that's much more effective in enabling the business of the daily running of the Army, but it's also the conduct of war and being effective in the fight with distributed mission command. Okay, so if you just look at the upper left-hand chart, it kind of shows a top-down approach from the enterprise down to the soldier. As we looked at this warfighting environment and taking it to the next step, we kind of flipped the operational view on its head a little bit. And we put the soldier first. The tactical warfight, and that's the mission area that we focused most of our attention on over the last several months, is trying to fix our ability to fight and win. Because the network is far too complicated. It's far too complex. It's not going to work in a contested environment against a peer adversary. And so those are some of the big things that we're really trying to attack with this network strategy. And so if you just kind of look at the 4 lines of effort, and you're going to hear more about each one of these individually. Transport. The ability to have assured network transport against a peer adversary in a contested environment. It sounds like a mouthful. Sounds pretty simple, or it should be simple, but it's really not that simple. Peer adversaries that have the ability to contest us, and we've never really been contested in cyberspace or in space or even on the ground in the battlefield. We've been congested, and we've had our own challenges just with spectrum saturation. We've had some challenges in cyber, but it's really been more of a nuisance than a true contested battle space for us. But we've never really been contested in network transport like we may against a peer adversary. Okay? A mission command suite, a set of applications that allow us to simplify the decision-making process, speed up our OODA loop, the ability to observe, orient, decide, and act faster than our enemy. It's having a suite of tools that allow us to do that with a single pane of glass and a common look and feel. The command post, mobility, survivability of our command post, getting out of tents and running a lot of Cat5 and fiber optic cable and all the different things that go into these miniature Taj Mahals that are out there trying to keep up on the battlefield and making sure that we can move with speed and we can stay survivable in a very contested environment. And then the fourth line of effort is interoperability. The ability to have joint connectivity baked into everything we do. Accessibility to each of our mission partners, whether it's our blokes from the UK. It's good to see you. Our Australian counterparts, our Five Eyes counterparts, our NATO counterparts. Interoperability with some of our joint partners is critical, but more importantly is accessibility for some of those partners that we want to play with and work with at a time and place of our choosing. So we've got to have accessibility rather than interoperability with all the coalition partners. Okay? So as we address the threat, and the threat is really the pacing item on our approach, there are some things we can attack right away, and we're trying to get after some of the simplicity of the network and improving our mobility and survivability and the ability to fight tonight. With the money we've been given in 18, although it's late in the year, we got a budget. We're going to move out smartly and really try to attack the ability to help us fight tonight, okay, in 18 and 19. As we build the POM, or the Program Objective Memorandum for 20 to 24, it's really about addressing the threat, the longer-term peer adversary, some of the things that are going to take a little longer to optimize our network and get those capabilities in there to ensure that we can actually address the threat. Next slide. So the plan, you've heard about it, halt, fix, pivot. We're going to halt programs that are not aligned with that future state network that we need. Okay, and we've decided there's about 3 programs that we will do a targeted halt on. We will fix our ability to fight tonight, and we're going to pivot to a strategy or an approach that allows us to adapt and buy solutions that are already out there, readily available, either being used by our joint partners, our special operations teammates. They're commercial off-the-shelf solutions that are readily available, non-developmental items that are somewhere out there that will give us a marked advantage immediately to fix our ability to fight and win. And then only develop those things only we can develop, okay? And Jim mentioned earlier, going after these tech exchange meetings. We've spent, since the cross-functional team stood up, we spent a lot of time diving into the science and technology portfolio, not only inside the Army, but across the Department of Defense, to see who's doing what in the science and technology and the research and development space, what resources are being applied to help us solve some of these problems. And so we, the Army, only align our resources with only things that we know are going to deliver. We're also counting heavily on industry research and development, because that's where the big brains are. A lot of capability out there with some of the companies you represent that will help us find the solutions we need going forward. And we're counting on that. We had a tech exchange meeting 6 and 7 February where we had 576 members of industry. Many of you were in this room, were there. 204 different companies, 87 of which were small business. A lot of non-traditional partners with innovative solutions. We did a call for white papers, okay? We have about 205 white papers coming in where right now we got a collective team diving into all of these white papers to see, okay, is this going to, we're basically, we're vetting the white papers to see what's going to have the most promise. And it's pretty daunting right now just going through all the good ideas. And I will tell you, some ideas are better than others, okay? Some of the ideas are going to actually, something we might be able to put in place fairly quickly. We'll try to see if we can experiment and get those in the hands of our soldiers sooner rather than later. And there's other things that might take a while. And then there's some that are just kind of an opportunity to get a sales pitch out there, get your foot in the water, and we'll work our way through that. But of 205 white papers, there's got to be a nugget or two that's worth pursuing. And And that's what we're looking at, okay? So, the network, the priority fixes. I talked about the 4 lines of effort. What General Crawford would tell you as the CIOG6, and in very simple terms, the network we need, it has to be flat. It goes back to converged networks. Getting rid of all these stovepipes, flattening the comms, flattening the network, simplifying the network, and making it, reducing the attack surface and really flattening that network. It's also got to be fast. It's got to be able to keep up. It's got to be able to get off the dime when the Global Response Force gets called. It's got to be able to keep up and not slow the momentum of a very mobile force in the fight. It's got to enable our decision makers to make decisions rapidly. It's also got to be mobile. And mobile and fast are kind of similar but different. Mobile means it's got to be able to keep up, again, with the fight. Fast is easy to operate, install, maintain, and sustain by soldiers. But it's also improving the OODA loop and the decision making. And then protected. Call it protected, call it resilient, call it what you will, but the bottom line is the network's got to work when an adversary out there gets a vote and is trying to inhibit us from being able to make the network work. So it's got to work in a contested environment against a peer adversary. So in simple terms, what we're trying to do is take this very complex thing that we have that's really a network of networks that is somehow configured into a Frankenstein model that we have today. We're trying to flatten it. We're trying to optimize it. We're trying to ensure that we adapt and buy solutions that are going to give us the marked advantage that we need, and then we're going to invest in the future in our science and technology efforts and our industry partnerships to get the network we need in the future. And it's about taking that left-hand side where the network says it's far too complex, it won't work in a contested environment, it's not expeditionary or mobile, and getting to the right-hand side of the chart. That optimized network that allows us to realize those principles, characteristics, and requirements that were laid out in the very first chart. Okay? So in simple terms, kind of higher to lower, 4 joint capability mission areas: the enterprise, the business, the intel, and the warfighting. Okay? All kind of centrally integrated with the under and the vice as the IT Oversight Council and the governance structure, with the CIOG6 of the Army as the lead integrator, pulling together the team of teams with horizontal integration, trying to move money to attack the problem and really get us, as an Army, the network we need. Okay? That's the approach, high level. Again, the governance structure is starting. Tied to this, though, this pivot, this model of pivoting, it's not just about the network. The network cross-functional team is one aspect of it, but as you know, there are 8 cross-functional teams and 6 modernization priorities. This is a high-level, big Army institutional reform, something we haven't done for over 33 years. Okay? We haven't made an institutional change this drastic since the 70s. Pretty significant undertaking by the Army. The senior leaders are all in. They're cashing in their chips on these 6 modernization priorities, of which the network is priority number 4. Depending on who you talk to, on the Hill, many believers think the network underpins it all and should be the number 1 priority. But the bottom line, the network is one of the top 6, and we, the collective team of teams, between John Morrison, Jim Mingus, General Crawford and his team, Nora Marcos and her leadership, across the Army, the acquisition community, we are all in this together. It really is a team of teams approach. But it's not just the Army team, okay? It's our industry teammates. Because we will not be able to deliver the network we need without the teamwork from industry. It's about the academic teammates that AFCEA helps bring to the table to help us think through these problems and not get burdened by the status quo and the groupthink that we find ourselves in. So leaders are engaged, leaders are involved, and the Army at the highest level is really driving this institutional change. Jim Mingus talked about the culture's got to shift. There's a lot of antibodies out there. Anybody that was out at Huntsville last week, the rollout, a lot of folks said, well, there wasn't a lot of detail in the rollout. Not yet, okay, but it's coming, okay? But if you just think about what was rolled out and the foundational change of something this big and this monumental and all the potential antibodies that could slow it down or take it off the rails, the rollout was pretty telling last week. And this is pretty instrumental. And the network underpins all of it. And the network we need is shown on the right-hand side there, but it's not just a warfighting network, okay? The warfighting network depends on the enterprise. It depends on the intel missionary and the business of just generating readiness all day, every day that allows our Army to function. So kind of in a top-level overview, this, going, again, this isn't my total function as the network cross-functional team lead. Okay? General Crawford and the CIOG6 team, they're worried about the entire enchilada. Where I fit in the network cross-functional team is really in the warfighting mission area. And really in the 2 of the 4 lines of effort is our immediate focus because we stood up as a pilot. And we'll hear more about that later, okay? But the network cross-functional team is a subset of the overall strategy. We are completely integrated with General Crawford and his team. We are completely nested with Jim Mingus and his team on the mission command strategy. And I know that document is floating around. You've got a version of that everybody's going to have access to this week. But it's all aligned, okay? And I will tell you, because there's such alignment in a positive way, we can all kind of finish each other's sentence as we go forward. Jim and I spent a lot of time last week visiting a bunch of the booths and meeting with some industry teammates out at Huntsville. But we were side by side. Not only was Jim there, but it was Dave Bassett from PEO C3T. And the 3 of us, folks were joking about us all being kind of joined at the hip. But the bottom line is requirements and acquisition have to deliver a network that meets the operational need. And that's what it's all about. And that's what we're really trying to get after. The network we have has been, is done okay. But the future is going to require a better network, much more mobile, much more, it's got to be flat, it's got to be fast, it's got to be mobile, it's got to be protected. Okay? I am excited about this opportunity. I'm excited about leading the cross-functional team. I'm also excited about the rest of the day because there's a great group of panels here and exciting times ahead for the Army. It all kind of boils down to, having the resources, okay, and being able to point those resources where we need them. If you look at kind of the path that got us here, in some cases it wasn't because we had a bad plan. It wasn't because we had a bad design necessarily. Decisions were made, based on fiscal limitations. If you kind of look back where we were about 2013 when we were going through sequestration and it started significantly slowing down the modernization path, it caused the Army to make some high-level decisions. We are at a good point right now because this institutional undertaking that the Army is taking on is being complemented by a fairly robust budget, which is going to help us in the next few years. But the time to attack is now, and all the Army senior leaders believe that, and they believe it, and they've got skin in the game, and they're driving it. So that's where I think this time it's different. And I think it's exciting times ahead, not only for the Army, but for all of our industry teammates that have something to offer. And I'm excited to partner with you and be part of the solution. And with that, I think I'll take a couple questions. Okay, we have 5 or 10 minutes for questions. Yes, sir. Yep. Yeah, so the Army is still looking at it, and it is still part of the plan. It's part of it's where the enterprise and the warfighting mission areas cross-connect, okay? It's about establishing capabilities at home station for our divisions and corps headquarters to have the ability to be able to do home station mission command while they're training, and also get off the dime and deploy and send a small footprint forward and be more expeditionary. But it is still a part of the Army plan. It is not something that the network cross-functional team is focused on, but it is something definitely that the Army as an institution, the CIOG6, between PEO EIS, Enterprise Information Systems, and PEO C3T, that they are working together. And really the lead for the Army on Home Station Mission Command kind of starts here at the Mission Command Center of Excellence. Does that answer your question? It is still part of the plan. Yes, sir. Yeah, so I have a GS-15 up at IEWNS that's on our team up at Aberdeen. So yes, I do. And then I have reached through John Morrison to his team down at Fort Gordon and reached into Kirk Volmet's team up at IEWNS. Okay, yeah. Most of the support's indirect. I do have a belly button up at Aberdeen that gets me connected to that team. Any other questions? Again, this brief is supposed to be top-level overview, not necessarily about the cross-functional team itself. Okay? Viasat's only allowed one question. Sorry.
Hi, sir. As you were talking about,
Viasat's on my panel too. So you guys set us up today.
as you were talking about the intelligence folks using moving forward as identifying and accessing the cloud, and we're going to look at that as a model for the Army or the signal portion of the Army. Do you see a limb factor being, since everything will reside in the cloud, access to the cloud, be of satellite bandwidth or folks on the edge having access to it? Do you see that as a limiting factor?
Yeah, so I don't think the cloud is a solution for all environments and all things to all people. So I think we got to be very careful about how we use the cloud, but it is about data, being able to control your data, protect your data, ensure the integrity of your data, and make sure that we have the cybersecurity service provider aspect built in. That's one of the big lessons we've been learning as we've gone through some cloud pilots is a lot of the underpinnings of cybersecurity and management of the data has been a challenge. So we've got to work our way through that. But I think the Intel community took them a little while to kind of figure it out, and we want to learn from them and not relearn any mistakes they may have made early on. In terms of cloud in a tactical environment, we'll see where it fits. It may not fit in every circumstance, but keeping big server stacks and a whole lot of solutions locked in a bay or in a team room, and you don't get hands-on over and over to sustain it, there may be niche capabilities where a distributed mission command cloud makes sense, and that's one of the things we want to explore with our next tech exchange meeting and see what's in the art of the possible in a way that allows us to, again, have access to the data, protect the integrity of that data, but be optimized for operating in a DIL environment, okay, where you're disconnected, you're intermittent, or you got low latency or low bandwidth. An environment out there where you might find yourself somewhat contested and you have to have access to your data in a forward-staged environment. Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? All right. Jimbo, what's next? All right. Well, I thank you all very much. Again, welcome to God's country. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Appreciate it. Okay, thank you very much, General Morris. Creighton, joined at the hip. I've got you all set. General Gallagher, thank you very much. I would offer that on behalf of AFCEA. We thank you and our audience. You'll have more contact. Thanks for double duty. You'll be seeing General Gallagher here and also as a member of the panel after lunch.